Greetings, Darklings, from across the interweb. It is once again I, the Duchess, Precious Ken, here for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. We have a very exciting show, one that has been a long time coming and has a lot of personal connection for Sounds and Shadows. But before we get to that, I do want to give a quick shout out here. We had two big news things that happened over the weekend. Number one, we had the Absolution Fest, which I was seeing videos and things in the feed from. It just looked absolutely amazing, and especially with everything that's happening down in Florida, just that Mark Paradise put together that amazing show and had it still come off, and all those bands and the connection there just looked so wonderful. I can't wait to get down there and be a part of one of those. But take a look at that for some of the coverage of the festival. And last night, I got to go see KMFDM and Chant in Pontiac, which was interesting for a lot of reasons. I was born and raised in Pontiac, Michigan. And the show was at a place called the Crowfoot, which used to be a club called Industry. That was like the first place I used a fake ID to go into a dance club to go see Tool or other bands or things play. So I kind of could look at the venue and see the old Industry dance club beneath what's been built over it now. So that was always kind of a fun, interesting experience. But KMFDM played really great set. I was really pleasantly surprised with kind of how Sasha's voice matured in this reggae. You don't always see that with, a big name act or something, but that was cool. And I'll tell you what, I mean, the main thing that I was going to this for was Bradley and Chant, and I was blown away. You have to go see Chant live. Everyone needs to. What he does in terms of industrial music with being a drummer first and foremost and using percussion as the eye of the storm to build industrial music around in terms of live drum percussion, with him singing, Phil Genesis style from within this giant drum kit lighting up. It's mesmerizing, and I really suggest everyone go see it. So without further ado, Sounds and Shadows, when I started it out, I had an early review of Mr. Jim Marcus, who then went on to produce for us the beautiful logo you see behind us, as well as Amaranths and a lot of important ones in the scene. This is a legend of the industrial field and the Chicago scene, and a dear friend, and is such an honor to have him with us today. Jim, welcome to our show.
Hey, it's great. It's great to be here.
I want to start out. There's so much I want to talk about, but let's get rolling first with the standard. Perhaps if it's a new, younger person that maybe hasn't been a part of the scene as much, but just give me a brief glimpse into your history, some of the bands and projects you've been a part of, leading up to Go Fight, your most recent project.
Oh yeah, Van Christie, who was shut this off. I'm sorry. Who was a performance artist at the Limelight, and he was doing this thing where he was the caveman, which meant that he basically hunkered around in a Cretaceous sort of environment, like a caveman, all day long behind a glass thing for people. And it was amazing. He was an amazing caveman, right? And I was working as a performance artist at Medusa's, which is a different club. And so everyone's like, oh, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet this guy. And so we met up and we're hanging out and decided that we wanted to do some music together. We didn't know exactly what we wanted to do together. So we had originally started to do a bunch of house music to make a living. That was like the deal. And we started working on, acid tracks and house records under the names of the Box Boys and a bunch of other names, and had done a bunch of stuff for Trax Records. And I think the reason I mention that is because it's just about going to be the 40th anniversary of house music.
Yeah.
2023. And a lot of us old house artists are getting the rights to our music back. And so we're re-releasing things. And so there's a lot of new stuff coming out and like old stuff coming out too as well. So a lot of the house tracks are coming back out again. We did a bunch of performances, and one of the performances that we actually did was at the Orbit Room here in Chicago. And the people at the Orbit Room were like, hey, we're taking this place apart. We're actually going to like knock this place down because the limelight's going away, everything's going away. So you guys can destroy the room if you want, you know? And so they had heard rumors that like we had a habit of like, you know, lighting things on fire and messing up rooms and destroying stuff and everything like that. And so we were like really excited. We were like, we're gonna, you know, we're actually being given permission to destroy a room because the one of our band's first shows, we got banned from the Metro for a year because we started fires on stage, you know. And so we were super excited that we had a chance to actually like, you know, destroy stuff
without getting in trouble
and not get in trouble. And they were like giving us like carte blanche. They're like, hey, destroy some stuff. We're wrecking the place anyway. So we did a show and really destroyed the stage, really messed everything up. Everything got lit on fire. It was really fun. And our drummer ended up in the emergency room. So I went to the emergency room. So I was there for like a day in the emergency room. And at the time, The Cure was in town. And their manager and the head of their record label, Chris Perry, called us and said that they had spent a huge amount of money on promotion for this Cure show. And the only thing on the radio was people talking about us and how we destroyed the Orbit Room. So he's like, well, I feel like I should meet you guys. And so we hooked up and we played them some stuff that we were doing and they signed us right away. So that was the first label we talked to. And so my band, which were at the time called the Warsaw Symphony, we got signed to Fiction. And eventually we dropped the symphony from our name with the second release. We were originally, all of our records were imports, so people actually thought that we were a European band, you know, so there were no like, because Fiction's it's an English record label. So even people I knew kept coming up to me and saying, you know, have you heard this band? They're from Europe. And everyone thought we were a European band. And so no one believed that it was us until we played at Medusa's and people showed up and they're like, wow, I guess it's you. So we ended up, working at Trax recording studio alongside a lot of people like, you know, Ministry and people like that. So we were constantly in the studio there. We had worked on some of the performance art stuff I did in New York. I had met Chris Randall, who started a band called Sister Machine Gun, and he came to Chicago, and so we worked on some of those first songs, and I did vocals on some of those first songs, and you know, he got signed to Wax Trax, Sister Machine Gun. You know, we work with other bands like, you know, Machines of Loving Grace and with Stabbing Westward and people like that. And a lot of the people from these bands were in our band first, and they went on to, you know, to do other things. You know, James Woolley from Nine Inch Nails was our drummer for a while. You know, Chris Hall from Stabbing Westward, you know, played with us. Chris Renner was playing with us, from Nine Inch Nails. And eventually I went to, you know, start playing with Pigface as well, you know, like a lot of people in the scene, you know, because, you know, Martin's such a great guy and he's really fun to work with. And, you know, we're in the studio at the same time. It just makes a lot of sense, you know. Played on a bunch of different records, played with, you know, Chris Connolly and everything. And a lot of it comes down to Trax, which was this, you know, at the time, the studio where everyone who was working at this place ended up, you know, incestuously doing work together, you know. So a lot of those early like Wax Trax records and everything had everybody on them, you know, everyone showed up. And then their various record labels had to try and figure out how to figure it out, you know, like, you know, for TV, Trent's record label TBT was trying to figure out, you know, what he could be on and what he couldn't be on, but that didn't really matter. He just was on whatever he was on. Well, same thing with us, because we were at the time on Mercury through Fiction. And so Mercury was like, wait a minute, you're on all these things. You can't be on all these things, you know? And so we worked on lots of different side projects and records with the guys from Chem Lab and stuff like that. We did this Oxygen 23 record with Jane Jensen. We did a whole bunch of different things. And then after we did this record, Engine, which made us decide that we really wanted to do a record that we had a little more control over, that we felt like we didn't have to fight about constantly, you know, because working on these different labels, there was a constant battle, I felt like, for everything, you know. I ended up getting sued by a tobacco company for some of the promotion stuff that was done for one of our records, because of the fact that it was in our contract that we couldn't be a part of a show that was promoted by a tobacco company. And so we made a big deal out of it and got sued. And, so we thought, we were good friends with Jim and Danny. We had done a lot of work together anyways. And so, we went to Wax Trax for Engine, which ended up being our best selling record so far at the time. So, we did a lot of touring, and we, traveled with a lot of different people. I did a lot of session percussion work with a whole lot of different artists and stuff like that. That band ended, and about 10 years ago, I started my current band. I can't believe it's actually been 10 years already, called Go Fight, which was with a couple of the people that I played live with Da Warsaw, and worked in the studio. Daniel Evans, who showed up when he was basically just 18, and Vince McKaylee, and we had decided to get together and do a whole new project wrapped around a whole different sort of structure, and understanding that it wasn't necessarily going to be industrial, that it was going to be something that we were really happy the industrial audience was willing to accept, but it was kind of its own thing, and a little more freedom to express some ideas that were I guess that weren't hugely popular at the time. When we were in fiction, we were constantly being accused of doing songs that were just drums and yelling. We had done this song called Land of the Free, which is one of the early songs we put out, and the record label was like, I don't know why this song is working on the dance floor. It's just drums and yelling. And we're like, yeah, it's pretty much just drums and yelling.
I think I saw on Facebook today you had a joke, or a comment kind of saying about it, that you need to do like a best of Go Fight songs that start with the word fuck, or have it in the first sentence of the song, that could be its own compilation.
God, it was such a huge battle with Da Warsaw, just to be like, because we were being made very, 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 very clearly aware of the fact from the record labels that we were kind of involved with, that every record we did was labeled, with the adult content.
Yeah, the sticker back then, that was a big deal.
They were constantly making us aware of the fact that, like, can you please do a record that doesn't, and we seemed unable to do that. And it really came to a head when TVT bought Wax Trax. So TVT had kind of bought Wax Trax, and everything kind of went to a very weird place very quickly. So Sister Machine was doing the single. It's called Nothing, and it's a good song. It's a really good song. And TVT had hired the people from Onyx to do some remixes for it. I hope this isn't a horribly boring story. So the guys from Onyx basically had come up with some things that I thought were kind of unlistenable. Chris wasn't happy with, no one was really happy with. So we sort of threw that money away. And then we got in the studio that night and quickly did remixes of our own that we liked. And we pulled things from stuff, and we had a really good time. And we pulled in all of our favorite musicians, and it was really fun. It was a really good time. Yeah. So we're always really happy with this single when it comes out. So the single comes out, and at a certain point, it becomes really clear that the record label has bleeped the word fuck out of every single version of the mix. Like, not just like the radio mix, which, by the way, this song wasn't going on the radio. This song was going to be played on the radio 3 times on college radio, potentially. It was going to be on the dance floor with DJs playing it. And the big beep on the dance floor was not going to sound great. And so basically, we realized that, TVT, like all these different labels, was willing to fuck over the dance floor to try and accommodate radio and college radio that didn't care.
Yeah.
And what's worse is the people at home, who were going to own this record forever and potentially like it, and potentially care about it, are going to have to deal with that for the rest of their life. So it was very much like all they wanted to do was put a mustache, on a painting, and then that's the painting forever.
Right.
And it was hugely frustrating. And so it became really clear that they couldn't really deal with record labels anymore that had restrictions on or concerns about what was restricted, what was appropriate, that sort of thing.
Usually I don't like to kind of turn the car in the middle of, the flow of the interview. But I want to do it here for you to talk a little more on that, because I think it's really interesting that when you have somebody like you that has decades of experience in watching the music industry change, in going from what it was then to what it is today. And there's going to be things that are better and there's going to be things that are worse. I mean, just life has changed.
Yeah.
Is this one of those that you feel like is one of the biggest benefits of the modern scene, the fact that radio DJs or just radio programming doesn't dictate music the way it used to? Now it's so much more online streaming of DJs, where stuff like this, like what you say, honestly, it doesn't matter. There's no law around it. It's, a bit more cowboy Wild West. I mean, other than, I guess you could say on YouTube or something, maybe. But from like a Twitch stream or anything like that, the freedom of this is more than it's ever been in terms of what you can say in a song. Nobody's going to give you much shit over it.
So, yes and no. All right. So I feel like I could talk about this forever, about the distinction between the world of record labels and the world of, like, we're never going to be on a record label again. I know that Go Fight is not a band that needs to be on a record label. We don't plan to be on a record label. That's not what we want to do.
And record labels aren't what they were anymore. They don't even mean the same thing today, I think, in 2022.
I mean, they can do wonderful things in terms of promotion. They can do wonderful things in terms of making a larger audience for you and everything like that. I think that we're one of those bands that like 5,000 people in the world are going to love and nobody else is going to care about. And that's how many records we're going to sell. And it's going to be like that. And I think I'm okay with that, because there's a place where that's really important to people, rather than having a record that sells 1 million copies and a whole bunch of people kind of like, having a very small thing that means a huge amount to a small number of people who have very distinct experiences. Like I know when we get a lot of people outside of our circle, for example, will send us, when we did the song Gay on the Dance Floor, I actually get hate mail from people who are outside of like the industrial scene. We did Moscow Drag. I got hate mail for that. It's funny that one of the most I guess aggressive things you can do is to be gay, and that's where the hate mail starts to come in. But I think that being able to do something for a rarefied audience that really cares, that really shares those experiences, is different. So what was interesting about this is that, like, you're in a early days of record labels, right? So if you go back to the 60s and 70s, every record that came out did something. It went somewhere. It sold copies of something, right? And a lot of that had to do with the fact that there was a filter that happened. The A&R guy was a filter, right? And so there, someone showed up at the door show, listened to a whole bunch of shows, waited till they were ready to recorded with them, threw out a whole bunch of songs with them, pulled some other ones in, made sure the producer was right, blah, blah, blah. There was a filter there. That filter doesn't.
Once a label had put that kind of money into it, they were going to make sure it did well enough to recoup that. Maybe not so much afterwards, but at least to that point, they were going to try and get their investment back.
And that was critical mass too, because if you think about it, I mean, we understand from a psychographic perspective, or from a neurological perspective, that you hear a song 7 times, you are something like 3 times more likely to think that it's a good song.
I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So what record labels were able to do is to get records into rotation so that people heard song more than 7 times and were more likely to think that they wanted to hear it again. And that's just how our brains work. If we hear a song only once or twice, it's very easy for us to dismiss a song. Sure. And so record labels were very good at a few things. They were, and the filtering abilities, I think people appreciated, because there weren't 1 million artists out there at the time.
Right.
There were fewer than that, and a lot of cassette tapes in the garbage can.
Mm-hmm.
And so without that filter, what we have right now are a lot of artists that are, putting stuff out there that would have ended up in the garbage can, for better or for worse, and not having the development attention paid to make sure that they are putting songs out.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the other aspect of that is that also you have a lot of artists that don't have the feedback that you're going to have from professionals who have had success at this, who had, if you're a young person and getting it, a lot of artists, you're 23, you basically have a usable studio in your bedroom, and nobody can tell you the art you're making isn't in its final form. Now, again, there's good and bad to that. It means that the sky is the limit, and you can get out there on the reaches, you know what I mean? And that's beautiful, I think, in maybe, expanding the idea. But you're right, it also means that the refinement process doesn't happen as much, and it can then get lost in the din.
And we're seeing the good and the bad. We see the good and the bad because, like, we are, all of us who are listeners, we are modern A&R people.
Mm-hmm.
We are the ones deciding what goes in the garbage can and what goes into our MP3 players or whatever. We are the modern A&R people. So we're seeing the good and bad. We're seeing, experiments that are ostentatious, that are, overly showy, that, can't possibly work, that are poorly produced and stuff like that, that don't work. But we're also seeing, experiments that are absolutely magnificent. Brilliant things that wouldn't have existed before, because it would have been really hard to find an A&R guy who had the right ear to actually, like, let that go through.
One I think of lately is the band Choke Chain. Like, that's when I thought, where would this have happened if, like you said, the process was record labels and A&R, that this would get the notoriety that it's starting to, and people catching on. But just because the net was the world, and finding all the 5 people in Kansas, the 3 in St. Louis, and all together, people are now starting to grasp hold and realize this raw, insane, intense wall of sound is beautiful and passionate and magnificent. And would that have happened without kind of the world being what it is now, where, as you said, we're all in this almost true democracy of deciding what we want to listen to?
Yeah. And Mark Truman is very good at what he does. He is very, very good at what he does. There's been an evolution going on. I can guarantee you right now that if it were on a record label, that first Choke Chain record would not have sounded like that. Right.
Sure.
So the first Choke Chain record was very much sounded like it was being done right next to you in the room. Sloppy. It wasn't high produced. It wasn't anything like that, but it was very immediate and was very raw. And that first record wouldn't have sounded like that if there'd been I'm guessing if there'd been an A&R guy involved in that, they would have tried to pretty it up a little bit. They would have tried to clean it up a little. They would have tried to create a little higher fidelity audio experience out of it. And it might not have met the content very well. And it might not have done what he wanted it to do very well. That being said, I think that he's evolving his audio skills, and records are sounding progressively, different. And I think it's really like giving him a bigger palette to work with, really. Right? But it is kind of interesting to think of, like, what experiments work, what experiments don't work, and what an A&R guy would do with this particular record. An A&R guy would be like, I don't really hear a single here, and it's funny because, I remember talking to Jim Thurwell a long time ago, and he had done this song with Nurse with Wound called Brain by Falling Machinery, Brain by Falling Masonry, which is maybe the most annoying song in the world, and I admit that I have pissed off neighbors with this song in really high volumes, right? And it's really, but here's the thing, it's actually really catchy. But it's horribly mean and aggressive, and it's recorded terribly, and it's really awful. But you know what? There are times where you want to go sit in your room and turn that song on, turn it on to 11, and just let the whole thing assault you like a bunch of jackhammers at 120 decibels. I
mean, and to me, that's what industrial music was to me. And I didn't, punk rock never hit me that same way. I don't know why. I can't explain it. A lot of people when I was in high school or whatever, that was their thing. But to me, industrial was my punk rock.
Mhm.
And, we've gone all over the world here in history, and I love where this discussion's going. But I wanted to say too, how I first got in contact with you. And I was a 16-year-old kid, kind of how I was talking, using a fake ID to get into industry, or in this case, my super cool Uncle Steve, my mom's youngest brother, that I don't know, I probably would have sucked if it wasn't for him, but, played me New Order and Joy Division when I was 13 and took me to techno shows, raves and stuff, and took me because I saw this movie called Hideaway when I was in maybe 10th grade, I think. And the soundtrack featured Sister Machine Gun, Die Warsaw. And I was obsessed with it. And he took me to see you play when I think I was, 15 or 16 years old. I think it was at in Detroit Masonic Temple, maybe. But or maybe it was the Shelter. Maybe that's what it was.
Or St. Andrews Hall.
Yeah, the Shelter was below St. Andrews Hall. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And so took me to the show and saw you play there and got a hat and a shirt and just blew me away. And it was years later, it was funny when I did the review for Go Fight, where I heard this sound and was just lit up by it, and ended up reaching out to you and talking to you. And honestly, we were, I don't know, halfway through a conversation, and we're talking about doing an interview and whatnot, a written one. Before doing some Google searching, I realized that was you. Like, and it was partway through before I did, and how much that meant to me and kind of the punk rock aspect. So when you're talking about this history and system, it does. It was a special place and meant a lot to me. And one of the things in industrial music of why you and Sister Machine Gun and some of these others were a big deal is industrial was, I was a pretty femmy kid who, took my fair share of ass beatings for it, and, had a Madonna hat and a Boy London shirt and eyeliner, and, got my ass whipped in high school. So industrial music, though it was my angry music and that thing I clung to, was very much your KMFDM, your Frontline Assembly, macho shit. A lot of it really was this like, yeah, chicken fucking ass. And,
Yeah.
and Die Warsaw to me was one of those things that you were openly showing industrial music didn't just have to be that one thing, that it could be a lot of things, that it could be me too. A kid like me with my mentality. And, I've never gushed to you that much, but it was a big fucking deal to me, Jim. And that you were open about being okay with like having more aspects to yourself, and that you're still very much like that in terms of how open you are about, your sexuality and everything else. At least for this one kid, that it meant a lot, that was a really big deal to broaden the concept of what industrial music was in the mid-90s at that time. And I think I would love to kind of hear your perspective on what was that like for you at that time, that you were actually living it and going through it and, writing and just being yourself. But was the culture different or harder then for you to kind of just be openly your weird, crazy, kooky self? Or was it always this kind of warm, embracing culture in how industrial music was when you were inside the circle?
Well, it's interesting. I saw this this meme that said, we're really lucky that Trent Reznor turned into the movie scoring.
I saw that.
Whatever, rather, like goth grandpa,
Goth dad or whatever. Yeah.
Goth dad, rather than some white supremacist, right?
Right.
And I think that what's interesting about this is that there's always been people who don't understand kind of what's going on, right? And my first instinct around that is like there's no trace of white supremacist in Trent Reznor. There's no piece of it, nothing. And it has, and if you listen to anything he's done, you'll see exactly where it's coming from. These are all music that's really about the voices of people on the edge, you know, it's people who are trans, it's people who are, people of color, LGBT people all across the spectrum. I mean, Wax Trax was started by two gay men, and this was really more about, it wasn't really about machismo as it was about anger and about expression and about being able to like tap into the things that happen at the far edges of every emotion, and if you look at Chris and Cozy, and if you look at Noe, and if you look at Genesis P. Origin, Throbbing Gristle, and everything like that, you're not seeing regular people in regular situations who are handling it in a regular way. You're seeing people on the edge, who have voices that weren't always the voices that mainstream media actually was interested in hearing, who are expressing things from a place that exists on the edge, and you're going to go to a show, and what sucks about this is that people would say, oh, ministry is so tough, and so whatever, and I'm like, and I've seen Al Jorgensen wear a dress, and get on stage and like that, and if you were to, call someone pejorative, gay name in front of him, he'd kick your ass, It's like, this isn't like that. This isn't like where, people from Skinny Puppy and everyone like that had to figure out where they stood. They always stood where they stand.
Sure.
It's like, you're not gonna, if you sit there and talk to Paul Barker and you're a trans person and you really, you need to feel like you belong somewhere, you're going to feel like you belong somewhere. It's like, this isn't something that evolved and just happened. It's all the original people in this community, like, understood that these were voices on the edge, and that's what they loved. And these people would all, no matter what their orientation or whatever, they would gravitate towards these people over here rather than here. They're not going to walk over to all of the tough people at this table over here. They're going to walk over to the people at this table over here who are actually fucking interesting. Yeah. And I feel like every once in a while people miss that. They find some sort of part of this that lets them pretend that as, white, cisgender heterosexual males that have a right to be angry about something, and they start like spouting off about their own anger as opposed to anger on behalf of other people, which is where this all began, So yeah, I feel like it's easy to miss some of that, I guess, if you're an outsider, but I think people who've been in the community for a long time, they totally get it. They absolutely understand, that this is always going to be, and always has been, a safe place for trans people, always going to be a safe place, for people of color, for women. I feel like I love the fact that like there's this like new resurgence right now of women's voices within this kind of like environment. It reminds me of how things like were in the beginning, and I just feel like we're coming back around full circle to someplace really good, which I think is really wonderful. And a lot of people, and I think there's a lot of efforts gone into it. A lot of people have listened to, hopefully to me, hopefully to Klaus Larson, hopefully to, the guys in Skinny Puppy, to, even Al Jorgensen, to people, and understood what there's no place for here.
Right. I love what you said too on that. That's a great offshoot that I think women, and I just did a interview last week with Mona Muir.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was talking about is something I've said, whether you're talking about Anya, Ayatoya, Safira.
Mm-hmm.
I think the power lately that we talked about of the freedom that anyone who puts in the time, effort, and education nowadays has access to being a legitimate producer, because the price of the technology has changed so much, and that you don't have to have a $50,000 studio to do anything, is that women are recording women and not having a fucking dude in the room when it's happening to produce top tier music. I think, to me, that has been one of my favorite things about the newest wave or goth industrial resurgence lately is how just that, whether it's trans voices or women's voices, can make this at an elite level all by themselves without any input on the artistic integrity of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I really like the fact that I feel like there's some permission giving that's being done by people who are working in this environment. So it takes people like, Kat Angelis and Severe V and people like that to
Yeah.
like make it okay, for women to get behind the computer and to, and to just make it understandable and make it something that people actually get so that men will get it.
Right.
So it's not like necessarily that they're leading this army of women. It's really that they're mostly leading this army of men to understand, once they buy the records and like it, that okay, there's something here, obviously.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about, you mentioned Jane Jensen, and I'd worked with her such a long time ago, and I learned a huge amount from her. And in our collaborations together a long time ago. And since then, she's done some things that are absolutely iconic in the world. Like, there are things that she's done that you actually have to own to be a music lover, at all,
Yeah.
And the film work that she's done, everything with Romeo and Juliet and stuff like that. There are actually things that she's done that you actually have to know in order to understand the underground scene in its entirety.
Right.
And so I feel like understanding the iconic nature of women like that, of people like Nicole Blackman and everything like that, how that's being replicated right now with people like Latoya and Sophia V and everyone like that. How they're building something that is not just a part of what we're doing; it's an essential piece that you have to know in order to understand it.
Right.
It's really great, and I think men are getting that now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. We've touched on a lot there. And I haven't got a chance yet to. So, talking about Go Fight, I want to come back around to this. So, this was a new excitement, a new project that now has been 10 years going, but that I stumbled into. And when you were talking about a different kind of sound that industrial embraced, even though you felt it was very much not that. And I remember my friend Pat, who does the DJ show, Pat 626, said to me early on when we were talking about Go Fight, called it fun industrial. And I always gotta love that moniker because that's just it. Like it is this not trying to be edgy, dark, or cool, trying to instead just make the most badass dance music that talked about something interesting, I don't know, bright and hopeful, or sensual or fun, and I love that aspect of Go Fight's sound. I also love that you have a lot of blatant, I don't know, political edge to it, and kind of like a punk rockness or commentary that goes into a lot of it too. Tell me a little bit about why this sound in particular was the one that appealed to you after kind of doing so many other things in a more industrial world for so long, and why this was a sound you needed to get into the world for yourself.
That's a great question. So when if you're at all interested in me, that's a great question. So when we were in Warsaw, Dan and I, when we started, we did this record called Big Electric Metal Bass Phase, and the plan for this record, we wrote down the plan for this record was to make the greatest like industrial party record ever. We wanted to make a record that at a party someone could put on from the beginning and play all the way to the end, and nobody would say, take this off, or whatever. They would dance to it the whole time. They would like it the whole time. It'd be a great party record, right? That was the job of the record. And I feel like we got somewhere with it. Like it paid off somehow, right? But I remember that as a my friend Natalie, who's been a friend of mine since I was really young. She was the model I used on the cover of the Warsaw Boar Guild record.
Mm-hmm.
She's a real fitness buff, and she had was constantly like rating records according to how good they are to exercise to, you know.
Nice.
And I'm like, you know what, that is that's not a bad,
No,
that's not a bad model to use, right? And so I actually had those two models in mind when I was thinking about this, about, you know, can we make a great exercise record? Can we make a great, and that's really, I know that sounds ridiculous, and make a great party record, and then just throw everything else in the bucket. I remember when Vince and Dan and I got together, like in 2013, at the table. I'm constantly feeding people, so I think I was feeding them at the time. And we were talking about what we want to do with this new band, right?
Mhm.
And I had a couple of names, and Go Fight one, just because it was weird and it didn't sound like it didn't sound like any other bands, so we liked that one. And then I showed them this logo I had done, which was a really simple version of somebody with their hands up in the air. You know, that's what the logo was basically. And the whole idea was that we wanted to do anthemic music that you had to sing to. You know, like where it was a big anthem. Every single song was like an anthem. You had to sing along to it. And whatever the instrumentation was, whatever it was, you did that. And in Warsaw, I had this habit for a long time of, I had a couple of different personalities that I would write songs through,
Mhm.
right? And each one of them had their own little thing. And like there was one personality, people who wrote songs that were very tough and that were very strongly political and potentially mean. And one person who wrote these like kind of uplifting, you know, songs that people could potentially like survive bad experiences by listening to. And one person who wrote these songs that were just about usually just about fucking, and just about, you know, just the most visceral of all human experiences, you know. And I remember writing that song "Suck It Up," which was a Dark Warsaw song that we had put together, and that was really written by that third person who just really wanted to write, you know, horribly offensive music about fucking, you know, and just really kind of let it out, right? And so I remember in Go Fight, I'm like, you know, I don't think all of these songwriters that I have really been given like equal amount of, you know, space. And I
Voice.
think that,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's a few other ones, right? And so I thought in Go Fight, there's no record labels involved, you know. I'm sitting here with friends of mine who get me finally after a long time, where I don't really feel like there's anything that needs to be hidden. I don't think like there's anything that needs to be, you know. And I was really clear with them. I'm like, there's going to be a lot of gay songs. There's going to be a lot of, you know, and everyone's like, yeah, let's do it, you know. And so I felt like there was a lot of freedom to let all these different songwriters write. And I can actually, what's interesting, I can pick out songs on every record and tell you what version of the what personality wrote that one, you know. So it's really dumb, but you know, I can tell you that this third personality, you know, who was responsible for writing like, you know, Fuck Like a Movie Star, and you know, Sex Theology, and yeah, and you know, and White Guys, and you know, LA California, and Gone to Mexico, and some of these songs that were really just about, you know, and LA California is just a song about traveling to California to be a porn star. That's it. You know, the entire song is just about that, about getting a boob job and a penis reconstruction to make it longer. So at the same time, so both of those things. I feel like being able to having that freedom to do that, knowing full well there was never going to be a label involved that was saying don't do this and do this and we can't release that right now. There was never going to be anyone that I had to argue with about any of that kind of stuff. That if every song, you know, we included swearing, and if every single song included something that was going to really annoy somebody, you know, that was fine too. And it just felt like freedom. It felt like a huge amount of freedom to me, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember that first Go Fight record, just being able to do it, and you know, at the time I just was doing all these. I'm like, I'm going to take a whole bunch of pictures of a bunch of people in military costumes playing strips, spin the bottle, and I'm going to use that for the artwork, you know.
Yeah.
And I did, and we played strips, spin the bottle all day long with guns, with people in military costumes, and you know, had a really good time and took all these pictures. And I'm like, I don't even really care who is going to complain about this, you know. And then I remember American Jihadi, when we named that record, I'm like, I don't even really care who's going to complain about the name of this record. I'm never going to have experience where people on the radio are like, well, you know, we're going to have to bleep out the name of this record, or we're going to have to, you know,
because you know, if you would have released that same album in 1991 or whatever and tried to go to your record labels, that would have been you in a room having a very long conversation probably before you could try and put that out.
I mean, every song was a conversation. I remember we did a song, Brand New Convertible Car, with Del Warsaw, which is a really simple little song all about consumerism, right?
Sure.
And I'm sitting here talking to the people at the record label, and they're like, they'd like us to change the name of it because we used like actual brand names for cars in there, and they're really concerned about, you know, they're like, well, you know, a lot of people like Cadillacs, and it was the most insane conversation I've ever had, where they're concerned about us alienating people because we're just not in the, you know, and I'm like, the song's about consumerism. I'm not sure exactly. For us to having a conversation about how poorly it's going to perform in the marketplace is really ironic.
Yeah.
You know, but that was it. It was like a constant stream of conversations at all times about all of these different things. I feel like when we did, you know, for Engine, I didn't want All Good Girls to be the first single, you know, because I feel like it's honestly a complicated song in terms of its meaning. You know? And I wanted Liberated to be the first single, and you know, we went back and forth about, like, you know, what's going on. I am 100% sure that I was a horrible nightmare to the record labels.
Sure.
You know, I'm positive that at a certain point every time they saw my name on the phone, they would freak out. You know I was awful. So it's really best for everybody involved that we're not on a record label. You know, when I started Pulse Black, it was specifically to put out, I have this other project called Everplastic, which is like a disco funk project.
Yeah, we've reviewed before. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. And the whole point behind Everplastic originally was I did this this EP that was full of really 5 relatively offensive songs, you know, but they were really fun, and I had a really good time doing them. And you know, we were playing these songs, we were trying to figure out, you know, what can we do that would be totally ridiculous. And so there's a song there about pegging. There's a song there about asking Elvis to have sex with his daughter. I mean, there's all sorts of like bizarre, you know, music on there. There's a song there, you know, in general about escorts, and it's a ridiculous record, and it's really a lot of fun. And somehow we got this really weird award at the time that the record had come out, because one of the songs became one of the top 5 songs played at strip clubs for that period of time, you know. But it was just fun, and it was just silly. And I started the record label to do that, to be like, nobody's going to put this record out, you know. So I started Pulse Black, which was originally supposed to be a totally uncensored record label. You know, the whole point of it was, and it is, you know, but I really felt like I thought there'd be a lot more of that going on. I thought more people would want to do things like, you know, when we did that first video for Fuck Like a Movie Star, we did it is a straight up X-rated video, you know, that has only stayed up on, I think it stayed up on Pornhub the longest, you know. But the same thing with Del Warsaw, we did the Born Again video, you know. Right. That was towards the end of my experiences with Del Warsaw, and it was just a massive battle, and we paid for it, not the record label, you know. And so the fact that it was an X-rated video, and it was just a video about someone who basically fell in love with Jesus, you know. And whether it was the nudity, you know, Emily Autumn's in that video, and for some reason she agreed to get naked for the video, you know, and we have other people in the video who had agreed to do, you know, some pretty crazy shit, and it was a huge amount of fun, and I love that video. And it's just one of those things where I think it was one of the final nails in the coffin, you know, with record labels in general, where they were just like, we can't do anything with these guys. This is just, you know, and I think it was part of it was the nudity, part of it was all the religious imagery and everything like that. You know? Do
you think it's you know, kind of in a Shane McGowan sense, where they took him up to sign his major record label deal, and he was so punk rock that he was so drunk he threw up on the contract because his DNA would not allow him. Do you think it's just that you wouldn't know how to sell out if you wanted to? You just don't have it in you to like allow yourself.
Well, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't put myself in the same level as Shane MacGowan. I'm just as handsome as he is, though, and I feel like I'm just as attractive as he is. We're both fours. But I feel like you know what part of it is that I don't have I have lots of ideas,
Mhm.
you know, and I'm not really good at not following the ideas I have in my head. You know, like I get obsessed, you know.
Yeah.
I'll sit there. I remember that I sat and pulled out a really bad little acoustic guitar with like plastic strings and wrote Dirty Fucking Pretty, one of the songs that's on this new record, you know. And as soon as I wrote it, I was like, I have to do something with this and put this song out. I just cannot not do this song. And I wasn't sure how not to do the song. You know, I know that the title is, you know, whatever, but I felt like I couldn't not do it, you know.
It is an infectious jam, and I love the fact that the dichotomy of that you have something that is an infectious pop hook that is filthy as hell, and like those two things living in synchronicity with each other is a thing of beauty. I love it. Like I love that it just forces you to mentally confront that every time you hear it.
You know, I've noticed that like I do a lot of writing on a piano or on a like an acoustic guitar, and I've noticed that you can listen to you can listen to a dance song and completely miss how fucked up the lyrics are, right? And how fucked up and cool and weird and like fucking crazy they are. But you cannot do that when you're listening to a song on an acoustic guitar, you know? So for lyric writers out there, if you really want to feel like you're going to write some shit that's fucked up, you have to do it on an acoustic guitar, because that's when you really notice that, wow, that is really fucked up, you know? Like I remember on the fourth Go Fight record, there's a song, You Are the Drug, you know? And the chorus is like, you know, you are the drug, physical kind. I'm on the nod. When you get me off, shoot you up tonight, you know, which doesn't sound like a really fucked up lyric when you hear it in a dance song.
Sure.
But when you're hearing someone potentially play it on an acoustic guitar at a coffee shop somewhere, you know, you're like, that's kind of fucked up, you know. and that's fun. I think that's really fun. But to your point, like, it's not like I don't know how to sell out. I feel like I would certainly have no more integrity than the next person. But I do feel like I don't know how to follow ideas that I love all the way down the rabbit hole.
Sure. No, I get that. And I think I would even say, I don't think Shane MacGowan has more integrity than the next person, you know? I think it just, like I said, some people, I don't know how to, even for financial gain, just avoid being who they are. They can't get out of the way of it. Like it, hey, I know I could probably have a nicer kitchen sink if I would just shut the fuck up right now, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to say it, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I think that I've never been the kind of person who just wants to do a song just to do a song, you know. I've always like wanted to do a song because I honestly fucking believe the song belongs in the world, you know. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm like narcissistic, and maybe I'm hearing something that no one else is hearing, but that's the only reason. Because as you said before, like we're in a weird world right now where like I don't have a release schedule.
Yeah.
You know, I have a record that is going to come out soon that like everyone's participated in. It's very close to being finished, but it like I don't feel like it's better than the last record yet. Yeah. And so I'm still working on it, those last little bits, those last couple of like percentages to try and make sure that's better than the last one. Because when you put something out now, it means something fundamentally different than I think it did in the 70s. You know, when you put a record out right now, no one is sitting here saying, Ken, you must put out the next Amaranth record. It must happen at this time.
Nobody is saying that for sure. We have one sitting there, but nobody is saying that. You're right.
But I'm saying your record label isn't saying, you know, you have to do it on a schedule, right?
Right.
You know that there's no reason to put a record out unless it's done and it's great.
Right.
And there's no reason to do that anymore. No one has any excuses that, oh, the record label made me, finish my contract out, so I had to write this trite.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way anymore. And so I feel like if the songs don't have to exist in the world, like, people shouldn't do them.
Right.
No,
that's a great point. Okay, so, and I knew this was going to happen when we got talking. No, we're at an hour, and this is cool. And I'm not even close to done. I have some more things I want to ask you, but I'm going to try and steer back in. So, to something you just said on, if I'm going to put out a song, I need to have a reason for it to be in the universe, right?
Yeah.
So the newest single that you have, and I want to make sure we talk about this, Dead Girl, why did it need to be in the universe?
So, all right. So, this record, Mecha Disco, that I've been working on, is a particularly complicated thing to do because we had this idea that we wanted to do like a concept record, right? So there's a concept behind this entire record. There's a story, the story of the Mecha Disco. It's like a science fiction story about in the future where the entire planet is one big disco.
I'm into it. I'm already in.
It's you can think it's really stupid and whatever, but it is an actual story. So there's a story. So what has to happen is that every single one of these songs has to have a meaning within the context of the record, but then have a meaning outside of that, so that it actually is a standalone song, And so Dead Girl is something I didn't really want to send out to be remixed because it's a very personal thing to me. And it is something I wrote, and I tweaked it a bit, but I wrote a while ago for a friend of mine. All right, this is kind of hard. All right, so like, you grow up in this particular scene, and there's people who dress all in black and have black lipstick on, and and everything like that, and they're happy. They're happy to be part of something. They're happy despite of the fact that they know that the world has all sorts of like humps to get over and everything like that.
Jim, I do have some experience with being the most chipper, happy-go-lucky fucking goth in the universe. So yeah, I can relate to this a little bit on a personal level.
I mean, we live in Chicago with Scary Lady Sarah, who is like one of the nicest people in the world.
Yes.
Who is one of like the most, she's just this beautiful goth person. But it's just, that's what you come to expect. And I think that a lot of the goth community is kind of embrace some of this idea that they love to be together, they love their friends, they love whatever. And every once in a while that ends up being a little bit of a facade. And I remember growing up, and my friend Rachel, who is really, really important to me, and she was going through a lot of things that I didn't necessarily understand. And that what happened at the end for her wasn't necessarily what she would have wanted to write for herself, and I miss her, and I know a lot of people miss her. I was just talking to some friends about her not that long ago, and I wanted to write a song for her that had enough of an edge that her sense of humor would have appreciated it, but that she would have seen herself in it, And so I did, and I realized that it fit the format of this particular album as well, in the story of what was actually going on. It was, however, a little bit too personal for me to like make a bunch of stems and send out to remixers.
Yeah.
To do, So I just wanted to kind of make sure it got out there as its own standalone thing before it showed up on this record, because as a standalone thing, I felt like it was a better homage to this person who was a pretty perfect person in a really imperfect world, and I feel like that's been my experience with a lot of people who in the goth scene who maybe feel things a little bit harder than would be healthy for them, to be a person that on their own is just a really uniquely interesting and perfect person, living in ways that we're not really meant to be living. you know.
Yeah, I like I said, that one hits hard for me. I get that a lot. And I have people ask me a lot because, I've laughed a couple times when you've kind of said to me during this interview, like, okay, don't judge me for this, or, hey, okay, it was a bit silly that I wrote this. I'm somebody who, yeah, definitely I play in a goth band that sings about ninjas and ass play and shit. Okay. I mean, I get that. And at the same time, this is genuine. I'm a silly person. I'm a I laugh most of the time. And I think a lot of people in the goth community, that's way more true than the trope of who we are. But at the same time, like, why do I write depressing, really dark song? Because that's real too. Like, people can be two things at once.
Yeah.
And somebody can be a really bright, positive beacon of light person, and they can also go through some traumatic, dark shit. And maybe part of the joking and beam of light and all those things is how they get through today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that I love that you wanted to make a song that encapsulated the wider reality of a person, not just a trope of a person.
And the thing is, I live in Chicago, and Chicago has a very unique sort of self-deprecating approach to the universe. Like, if you walk up to someone in Chicago and say, "I like that dress," they'll say, "Oh, I got this on sale."
Yes, that's
You
a
know?
very Midwest thing. Yes.
Yeah, there's just no way to compliment someone from Chicago, and to walk up to your friend and say that I love you, and to have her say, "Well, somebody will love me one day," and
Right.
shrug it off,
Sure.
is a difficult thing to hear.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you realize you're not going to be able to get through to them that they're loved right now, and that's going to be kind of a tough call. I remember being at Warzone on our studio and hearing, I'm gonna, for the purpose of the story, I'm gonna say that I might have been one of the very first person ever to hear the very first like Stabbing Westward demo, and talking to Chris and Walter about this, about how that these songs represented something that everybody in the world had gone through a phase and felt before,
I know I did.
Yeah. And I felt like that's one of the reasons why I thought from originally, I did the original Stabbing Westward logo. I tried to do the best I could to promote them, designing record covers for them and everything. I tried to do the best I could to pass cassettes around, because I felt like they were doing something really important, which was they were taking every person in the audience and saying, we don't have any answers for you.
Right.
But you felt like this at one point, and we want you to know that somebody else did too.
I think beyond that too, like, and again, I can tell you, is that 16-year-old kid Stabbing Westward. Colin and I were sitting there at Cold Waves when Stabbing Westward did that performance a couple years back. And I remember us both looking at each other, and we were like, okay, when they did Save Yourself, and we both looked at each other and kind of went like, oh, fuck. We're that 16-year-old kid crying in our bedroom again. And I think the big power of this wasn't just, hey, I felt like this and you feel like this, and that helps you feel okay. It was that you feel like this, and this hot, cool as fuck, like bigger than life dude that you think is the epitome of everything that would make your life better if you were more like this person,
feels that
felt like this.
Yeah.
That's the thing to me, that like when you have a band like that or a song like that, everybody hits that in their heart on such a deep level.
Yeah. I think that, that's what Nine Inch Nails is good at, that's what that's what even Linkin Park was good at, it's
Sure.
like finding ways to make sure that people understood that, like, it's the great leveler, if you felt like this, we felt like this too. Chris Hall is an incredibly likable person, and he it's very easy to want to be like him,
Sure.
So I think that and he's very authentic, he's very real, and so I think the idea that someone like him just had the same problem that you did, that's not the kind of stuff that I've like written a lot in my life. But I have to tell you that, like, I'm fascinated by the idea of ritual, right?
Yeah,
And this is one of the things that brings me to, like, there's a lot of pop music that I absolutely love. Like,
sure.
I really believe that everybody who listens to Superstition by Stevie Wonder is basically having the same experience. You
Yeah.
know, it's the same human experience that we're all having. If you listen to September by Earth, Wind, and Fire, I think that every person is having the same human experience. And that is a ritual. That's a really profound and important ritual. And rituals like are incredibly um, supportive in a way that I don't think anything else in the world is. When I was at Burning Man this year, I remember there are rituals that have evolved organically at Burning Man that are really fascinating. And one of
Mhm.
them is, here it is. It's like Friday night and the man is burning, right? And so this giant, effigy of a man
Effigy, yeah.
is burning. And every year it's like a little bit more explosive and a little bit more fire and a little bit more wow, right? So what happens is everyone pulls their art cars around and they're all gathered to watch this. And for hours they're like standing there, waiting, and they're talking to their friends and they're having a really good time and they're yelling and they're screaming. And the man burns and everyone goes crazy. Everyone goes nuts, and it's like everyone at that moment is feeling the same exact thing. They're experiencing the same exact thing, which is the immensity of the human experience. Everything about being a human being is encapsulated in that. Everything about the joy of being with your friends, with people that like you have something like really powerful in common with people who accept you. Everything about that is being celebrated, right? Art is being celebrated. The fact that like we're on this planet to do something, and all of us have to figure out what that is, and all of us, all those people have decided that art was one of those things, you know, and just this feeling that this is healthy for my brain, like people who come back from like great art experiences don't come back and commit suicide. People who come back from war commit suicide.
Right.
And we're not designed to kill people. We're not designed to hurt people. We are designed for art. We are designed to build and to make. And that entire experience just says that over and over again. The next night, Saturday night, is the temple burn,
Mhm.
right? And so throughout the course of the week, everyone's put up pictures of people that they love that were at previous burns that died throughout the course of the year. And then on Sunday, the temple burns and it lights up. So it's the same visual experience, but thousands and thousands of people and not a single sound. It's the most quiet thing you've ever heard in your life. Not one single sound. This evolved on its own. No one said, okay, don't say anything. It evolved on its own. So somehow thousands and thousands of people are experiencing this ritual. And I know for a fact they're all experiencing the same exact human experience. They're all recognizing the immensity of what it means to be gone. And that
I
ritual
love
is
that.
powerful,
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I know one for me that's, I don't know, kind of a reoccurring theme on this show that we talk about a lot is I do think that, again, I am not one of those that's like, oh, shit was back in the day was so, I'm kind of one of those that's a big cheerleader for let's evolve what the scene means and find ways to bring younger people in and thrive and keep this going. That's a personal thing for me that's very important. But I do think that one of the rituals that I miss and I feel like is fading away and becoming a lost art is the idea of when I was 22, 23, 24, a Friday night activity could very much be 5 or 6 friends come over. We would sit down with a record player and we would take out an album, and the ritual of taking it out of the
Yeah.
sleeve, putting it on, dropping the needle, and the 6 of it opening a beer, and we'd listen and we'd talk, sometimes about it, sometimes about life, but that was the activity within itself for the night. And I feel like nowadays the way music is distributed with earbuds on your phone, and which is cool because you have it everywhere, and again there's upside to that, but the connection between people related to music,
Yeah.
I think, is a fading ritual, a fading
Well, I
art.
hope it's not. And I feel like this pandemic did a lot to eliminate the communal ritual power of a lot of the music that we actually do. One of the
Sure.
reasons that I started DJing is because like we joke about this. We joke about the fact that like there's 40 songs you could put on to like revitalize any industrial dance floor. You know
Sure.
that, right? So, if I'm up there and I'm DJing and people aren't paying any attention, I can put on, Ritual Noise by Coming In, or I can put on,
Bloodlands or whatever. Yeah.
Dead Stars or something like that,
Yeah.
And there's there's things you can put at Killing Fields by FGFC, 820,
Yeah.
There's lots of things you can put on that, okay, people are going to dance now. It's okay, and we can joke about that, but in reality, that's a ritual. That's a very deeply ingrained ritual. Just this feeling of being surrounded by your friends, dancing to that one song that really like moved you, that really kind of made that whole dance floor move, and like during the pandemic, I was doing like no DJing, and I really missed that feeling. It's very similar when you're DJing at this sounds so dumb, you're DJing at a wedding, and you're like, okay, I'm going to put on As by Stevie Wonder, and everyone's going to be like, moving back and forth. But just the feeling of being able to do something and have the room move. When I was at Coldways for that final night and saw Front 242, I remember seeing Front 242's first show here back in Medusa's and everything like that. And they played You Men, and they played You Men again at this show. And I just felt like this giant circle, which was very complete, and it was just beautiful. And I remember that song, it just being one of my favorite songs in the whole world. It was such a great song. And then they went right into Headhunter, which is I'm watching the floor, and everyone's out there like, one, blow the target, two,
Yeah.
they're putting, and I'm like, I'm watching this ritual happen in real time. And not sure how many of these people have ever seen this or done this before, but it felt natural to them. And the whole room full of people was having the same human experience at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was really powerful. And I think about this a lot. I think about our capacity for building ritual, which is possible because we're not talking about potentially about, a billion people, we're talking about a few thousand people who do have similar experiences and can accept each other's experiences.
Like you said, that Chris Hall capturing someone done you wrong, and you're sad in your bedroom and you're young and it's the end of the world, whether it's the end of the world or not, but it is for you in that moment.
Yeah.
And yes, like the capacity to build a ritual around that because you agree on a shared experience.
Yeah, and people didn't need save yourself. They didn't need it to have an answer.
Right.
They just needed it to be the question that they were all asking at one point or another.
Why are you asking me? I don't know what to do. I don't even know how to fix this for me, let alone fix it for you. Like,
yeah. And I think that was really powerful. And I feel like there's so many times I can look through my history in this entire scene and point out so many moments where I felt like that was a powerful ritual that was every bit as explosive and uniting to me as any of the rituals that happened at Burning Man. I had this experience at Burning Man that was like narcissistically, I'm sure, but part of maybe one of the most interesting experiences of my life. And as a musician, I would advise you to do something like this, Okay. So I'm at Burning Man in a camp full of people that I really liked, that I thought were really kind, nice people. And we're part of the Sunset Lounge, which is like
no, that was for me. That was carry on.
Oh, so we're part of the Sunset Lounge, and which is basically a dive bar, where people can come and they can drink and everything like that. It's important, And one night, the last night that we were there, there was this thing called the burn off, where all these cars that have that are run on propane that shoot fire and stuff like that all get together and everything. They burn off the last of the propane they can't take back with them, right? So it's this big spectacle of all this like fire everywhere. And one of the reasons why this has evolved, obviously, at Burning Man is that there's nothing there to catch fire. It's just it's
a
dust
desert.
everywhere. So
Yeah.
so you're not going to start like some sort of grass fire out there in the middle of Nevada. So I'm in the art car with like 30 people from our camp, right? And I had my MP3 player with, and I just plugged it in, and it was a really nice, big, loud sound system. It was a very, very loud sound system. And I started playing like all the Go Fight songs from A to Z that had been on the last, all these last records, including like the new one that hasn't come out yet. And it was this incredibly powerful experience of like nobody said, hey, turn the shit off. Every single song that played, there's not one of them I felt like I'm really embarrassed by this song, I want to skip it. None of them felt like they didn't need to be there. None of them felt like I hated it. Nobody said, can you turn this off? People walking by were dancing, or they were, a couple people even knew who it was, and it was just a powerful experience where I felt like, and this is the important part, I guess. I felt like this is what I've done for the last 10 years of my life, and it's okay.
I think that's
the most validating
beautiful.
thing I feel ever.
It's validating, but at the same time, I think the importance is you accepting that validation. And I think that's another thing that, like, as a society, we've trained ourselves away from. That it's weird to like you said, the world needs art. And when you do something, being able to say, yeah, that's good. I don't know that it was the greatest thing. I hope it's not the greatest thing I'll ever do. I want to keep doing things.
Yeah, totally.
But like, yeah, that's good. And other people get it. And I made a thing that like made someone feel something. That should feel good. That should feel, but there's so many things to feel bad about in this world. Like when you have a moment like that, to appreciate it,
Yeah. And I would advise any musician to try and do this, to take everything you've done in your catalog with a particular band and just play it like back to front in a loud, pretty good sounding environment, and just experience that, and just feel like, okay, this is the last 5 years or 10 years or whatever of my life, and it really has been. It's been 10 like immersive years of my life, like really caring about this project and really wanting to do something amazing and great, and it felt very much like, and of course the Midwestern in me is always, you always want to be like, oh, I could have done that better or whatever. That's the Midwestern.
I got this song on sale.
It was on sale, this whole thing,
Oh.
But yeah, you don't want to be your own fan even for a minute, and I think it's important to be able to just sit there and recognize that, like, this is what I did, this is me, and I don't feel bad about it.
I always say all the time that, when I see one of my friends like ragging on themselves online, or I am the first one to jump in and be like, look, what you just said right now, nobody talks about my fucking friends that way, including them. So shut the fuck up about that right now, and feel what you feel, but I won't have you dragging my friend, even if it's the person doing it.
Yeah. And I guess it's important with your friends to be able to, to stand up and do that. And I could joke about the fact that it's a Midwest thing, but I'm sure it's an everywhere thing.
Everyone thing, sure.
It's a very easy thing to kind of come down on yourself and to, find reasons why you're not good enough, why you're not enough,
Okay, we hit the 1.5 mark, and I'm going to start doing some quick fires right now of just some fun stuff that we're going to get through, and then we're going to spin the new single, and I'm excited. So here we go. Thing number one, your dog. Why is he the best boy?
Oh no, she's the best girl.
She's the best. I'm sorry. Why is she the best girl? I just get used to it with dogs. I don't know why. I'm a cat
dogs
person.
Always seem very male, don't they? Well, she's in the room right now and is
let's hear.
She's sleeping over there. So that's pretty good. Right there, that's pretty good. Like, she hasn't barked at all or complained or anything.
Good girl. What a good
girl. And in the studio, I know she doesn't. I'm in the studio right now, and I know that she doesn't like the loud noise, you know. But she's actually been very good. She's a really wonderful dog. She does not like to be alone, that's for sure, which is nice because I can kind of walk down the street with her mostly without a leash or anything because
Mhm.
she's far more terrified of being without someone
Yeah,
or me than she is about anything else. So
wonderful.
which is
Question
what.
number two. Again, the band is called Go Fight. And I don't know, I learned this when Colin and I came and visited you and stayed with you. I didn't know that you were very into boxing and were an athlete and did that. If you could, in a sanctioned event, I'm not saying go hunt somebody down and beat the fuck out of them, but in a sanctioned event you could fight anyone, box them, who would you want to fight, living or dead, any human being, in a sanctioned boxing match?
All right. So for the record, yeah, I was a boxer when I was younger. I'm 100% sure, and I actually won some titles and went to nationals and everything like that.
Yeah.
I 100% am sure that, like my coach once said to me, "Hey, Marcus, you can really take a hit," which is basically the coach's version of saying you have the athletic ability of a brick wall. You
Yeah.
know, so my skill apparently is that I can be punched a lot without any sort of impact or anything like that. So I wouldn't say that that I'm a great boxer or anything like that. I also know that people that I've been knocked unconscious like 10 times in my life, which is probably 9 times more than is really safe. Like who knows how smart I could have been if I had not been. But I have to tell you that right now, the person I'm the most mad at is Matt Walsh, and I feel like I would take the opportunity to punch this person, and solely for this one reason. Somehow, Facebook has decided that it wants to put Matt Walsh ads on my feed because I've discussed trans issues, right? And
Right.
so his ridiculous movie that basically insults and demeans trans people, and was done as a lie. That's how he got the people involved to speak, and was edited and forcibly, horrifically. That that makes me realize that other people who discuss trans issues, like for example, young trans people, are potentially seeing that as well. And the idea that like a 20-year-old trans kid is seeing ads for this horrific movie and is feeling some way because of it makes me, as a parent, so angry, so incredibly angry that I would punch this guy in a second. And if someone put him in a ring with me, I feel like I could successfully execute that fight.
I would love to see that fight. I am here for it. All right. Last one I have for you here on the quick hits is on Sounds and Shadows. We are a music review page. And so it's always important to me when I have an artist on, I want to know, give me 1 or 2 things that you're listening to right now that are getting you fired up. So give me a shout out to, a couple things that you're hearing that have, come out recently, any genre, that get you excited and fired up about music.
Wow. All right. So, like I know you do this too, but I try and listen to all of my friends to
Sure.
start with, right?
Yeah.
And usually when other stuff is not paying off, that pays off. So there's a new Jane Jensen record out that's really great. Sophia V is working on some things, and I've heard some stuff that she's done recently. It's really amazing.
Yes.
Dissonance, Stoneburner. There's some great Q&A stuff out there. Silverwalk's record is great.
And you do the art for it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do the art for this album. I did the last album, but
Or the logo,
the logo and everything. I did do the art for the new Derision Cult record, which I think is this got some really great stuff, and Chris Conley's on there and stuff like that. I feel like it depends on the mood I'm in. Like lately, like during sad moments. I mean, I'm a really big fan of Nicholas Godin, and I feel like I've been really kind of like binging that a lot. The new Ozuna record is a really great like exercise in minimalism, and it's really the new Heogen record is really lush and really beautiful and very dreamlike, and it's really wonderful. But you know, at the end of the day, it's like there's records out this year from like Orbital and Röyksopp and people who are like, you know, like that you can rely on, you
Yeah,
know,
established
and
names that
yeah, and they're fucking beautiful. A new Röyksopp record is fucking amazing, you
yeah.
know. And if you listen to it all the way through, it's like you just want to play it over and over again, you know. I was talking to some friends about the fact that I just had my first experience doing mushrooms, and I had put together a really really long like very chill out sort of elegant playlist that was actually a 4 day long playlist, you know, just in case I wanted to skip forward past things and everything. And I actually listened to it in the course of 4 days, and a bunch of these artists I talked about were in there. And I just felt like really it really worked for me to be able to just like hear this whole long playlist and just listen to music straight through for like 4 days, you
We
know.
used to call that the set the controls for the Heart of the Sun playlist.
Yeah, and then just go and everything. You know, it was funny though. You know, we were talking about Jane Jensen. When I first started this with friends of mine, we were sitting around, and every time they said, you know, who is this? That's great. It was her, you know, or it was like Safira, or it was like someone I knew, you know, and I
Yeah.
kind of felt good about that. I felt like, okay, well, maybe I'm surrounding myself by some of the right people.
More and more every day, Jim, I get that feeling that, yeah, when I get talking to people about all the music I'm excited about, it is a great sense of pride that I always feel that like, oh yeah, that's somebody that like, yeah, I know them, and you know,
Yeah.
whatever I'm sharing this music now. So beautiful. I love that. Those are great picks. You know, it's funny, you said a bunch there and you kept bringing up your favorite workout music, or kind of that was the I'm going to give you one now if you haven't heard it, but my current favorite workout jams
Yeah.
is the new Roan Letterman Rage. If you haven't heard that yet, that is
Really
my
good record.
that is my workout jam, like that I put on when I'm going for a walk in the morning or any.
Yeah.
That is my fuel to get me going
Yeah.
music.
Yeah, and I get that. It's a really good record. I feel like it can replace the Wolf Band record that was there. There was an Ethan Fox record that was a really good workout record too. But like Wolf Band was like the big, you know, workout record for a while. 2.5 long minute songs that were just aggressive and unyielding.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great record, and you know they're great people.
All right. So this has been amazing. And I feel like we're gonna have to do this again now, Jim, because there were 6 questions I had that we never even got to. There's a lot that I would love to still talk to you about. So we are going to spin out to end here on the new single that we discussed, Dead Girl. And there's also a video on Bandcamp, as well as the song up there.
Mhm.
The album is coming up for release. Do you have anything else quickly that you want to shout out, or things that you have in the near future before we spin out to the single?
Uh, well, you know, I did want to kind of mention that, like, you know, I've done a number of singles from this album already, you
Mhm.
know, and the job of this album was supposed to be to make a record that was entirely singles, that just
Mhm.
felt like it was like 13 singles that belonged together. And I felt like doing the remixes stuff, I had a lot of help from a lot of people doing remixes and everything. And I listened back to what some of those are, and I'm just so impressed and so amazed by some of the remixes, you know, like from like Null Device and Stowburner and, you know, Sweat Boys and people like that. You know, they did some amazing job.
Benny. Sorry, I
Yeah,
just get excited about Benny Sweat.
yeah, but again, it's like I think that's one of the great things about being in a community. It just feels very much like it was at the beginning, where everybody's sitting at Trax Records and they're passing records back and forth from Studio A to Studio B, and they're, you know, they're asking people to show, you know, I get called into a Ministry record to play tambourine over my head for like, you know, the entire record, which he didn't have to make me play it the whole time. They could have sampled it. But yeah, it just feels like that, where people are just being like pulled away from what they do by their friends to kind of pitch in. And you know, I feel like because of that, I put the last few singles up in a row, and I just feel like they're just such fun for me to listen to, because there's so much depth that comes from other people's experiences and other people's like vision and the work that they've done and everything. And I'm so grateful for that, you know, and especially people that like I've known forever, like, you know, John Norton from Blue Light Christ, who I was there at the beginning of his career, Brian Black from Halo Black, I was there at the beginning of his career, just all these people just feeling like I was a part of their career at the beginning, and now we're all a part of doing this together. It kind of feels good. So I listened to the last few singles together, and I just feel good about that. And it's entirely because of all these people. So
this has been church for me, talking about the power of the industrial goth community, with Jim Marcus, somebody who's been a special part of it for us, who did our logo, and has just been a huge supporter from the beginning. Thank you so much for the discussion, Jim. Everybody go check out Dead Girl there on Bandcamp and the entire Go Fight discography. And all of you out there in interweb land, keep it dark, yeah.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
If in your heart you don't see, if in your hands there's nothing there, it's doing something to me. Dead girl, it's just a matter of time. Dead girl, you're gonna make up your mind. Dead girl, I kinda like you that way. Dead girl, someone will love you one day. Dead girl, you're gonna make up your mind. Dead girl, I kinda like you that way. Dead girl, someone will love you one day. If in your eyes, if in your eyes, if in your eyes, if in your eyes, someone will love you one day. Someone will love you one day. Someone will love you one day.